Most of the stuff, if you go back and look at most of the stuff, sorry for this because I'm going to end up broke and I'm going to end up frustrated. Car enthusiast thing, isn't it? It's you. If I wanted just a good car that handled well and performed well, I would just get a Camry, which outperforms any car that I grew up on.
They decided that,
Oh,
your phone.
Macintosh users. Well, now we see your face. Patrick is dressed like an adult.
Yeah.
Because
This isn't an interview, you know.
I am here not just to talk with you guys, but to do about 6 insanely important things related to the beginning of the semester that I haven't gotten done yet. So this thing that if I dress semi-professionally, it keeps me more focused on things, and I'm not just going to like sit back and do whatever. So
I can appreciate that.
Feeling fancy. I mean, yeah,
Patrick, are you suggesting we need to go change?
For the first 2 years of work from home, I chose at least 2 days a week where I would put on a collared shirt and pants.
Yes.
To try to keep some level of normalcy. And then when I realized that I was never going back into the office, that quickly devolved into pajamas every day.
Oh. It is fun. I mean, we will have the faculty meetings, the department meetings on Zoom every once in a while. And once in a while, one guy in particular, he will get up to go do something, and he will be wearing the button-down shirt. And then he gets up and he's wearing some like shiny ass basketball shorts or something. And yeah, at least he had pants on. Okay.
He didn't do total Pooh Bear.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I am here. It has been a ridiculous summer, but at least we're basically okay.
Welcome to today's Bad Idea, episode 4. I'm Connor Feely. I'm here with Mr. George Edward Jones. Our guest today is Mr. Patrick Frawley. Patrick is a writer at States of Motion, where he writes about cars, automotive engineering, and stolen motorcycles in New York City. Patrick was a writer at Jalopnik and currently director of general education mathematics at the University of Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut. George, your challenge for today is to guess what Patrick's first car is by the end of this conversation. Welcome, Patrick. Good to have you.
Happy to be here. This is an opportunity to be cathartic about certain things that are like reasonable in polite society, so that's fine with me.
It's more fun, actually. George and I find it's more fun when he's actually a bit more ambivalent about things I say and he pulls me up. I've had some just magical moments in recent week where George has things like, he doesn't wear white socks and loafers and wants to do Ayrton Senna. And he also, I think, called Enzo Ferrari a douche nozzle. So there's all kinds of fun stuff going on in here, and we're just getting warmed up.
I was going to say white socks and loafers. That was say thank you for clarifying that, George. For a second, I was like, are you going to become a Mormon on us or something?
Background on that is we were talking about being a car enthusiast versus being a driving enthusiast, and it's like, I like driving and everything, but I'm not the best driver in the world, and I'm not going to pretend like, I'm out there in white socks and loafers teaching people how to heel toe.
Heel toe. Yeah. I want to see pictures, though. That I want to see. I will pay good money for these photos. How did you and George connect?
Ironically, I think the first time that I actually consciously remember, talking with George about anything or having him exist on a certain level was when my first bike got stolen. We sort of, and this is always the thing that I get very kind of, there's a sensitivity around this. We were both in Davey's orbit. I mean, Davey G. Johnson served as a sort of solar center for a lot of us. He just attracted a lot of people that kind of, were on his wavelength, and in that way we're on, each other's wavelength. And, we just started talking, he was the first one to post up something after the first Honda got stolen. And it was like, okay, thank you very much. That's sort of out of nowhere, but good. And then after what happened with Davey, we just started talking with each other. And, it's like, I got this really cool dude down in Atlanta who is just as off kilter about things as I am. He's a better guitarist than I will ever be. He's into more, stuff than I'll ever be. He knows all kinds of things, and he just seems to be like just the kind of person that you want to be like talking with. And that's been for what, the past 3-4 years now. So hey,
Friends of Davey, like just Davey kind of introduced me to the greater automotive world. A lot of auto journals started following me. I think Jean Jennings, um, Davey got to me from her, and then a lot of people my age-ish got to me from Davey. And so, yeah, I mean, folks like Patrick and Sam Smith and even like Lieberman and Elena Scher and all of those folks. Davey was a weirdo, and all of the weirdos who were around him kind of congregated. And some of us got closer than others, and some of us kind of drifted off. But I think all of us still kind of remained in each other's orbit after he left us. Which, as my wife will tell you, there's a good chance that he just ejected his human skin and went back to the alien planet that he came from. Not so much died.
Yeah,
And
Chrysalis.
look, if you spent any time around Davey, that makes perfect sense. That he might have actually been an actual alien. So
he could have been somebody, a side character in Men in Black with no trouble whatsoever.
yeah, just as him.
All to the good. Yeah, it's a little bit funny. I got to know, and say I got to get connected to Davey a little later on. When I was starting to do the writing stuff, and when I was starting to do a lot of the commenting stuff, he was already out from Jalopnik. He was gone and off to other things. And it was sort of I was in there for a while, not too much. It took a while to become obvious that I could not be in grad school and trying to work and do all the writing stuff at the same time. When Justin Hyde brought me on, he sort of faked me out and said, "Oh, like 3 hours a day, or 3 hours a week even, or something like that. No big deal. It takes over your life, and it sucks up everything. And especially, when I was there, 2011, 2012, there were like 5 of us on staff, and we were scrambling constantly to keep everything, up and readable and everything. And Davey, you get into the car stuff, and he was one of the ones that made it cool for some of us that we didn't have to focus on the really hardcore speed stuff. Davey didn't seem like a I must have the screaming fastest thing in the world. He was the one that had the Mercedes trip that was like one of the greatest things that we've all read. He liked to get into cars for the purpose of traveling. The business with him reading on the road at a deeply too impressionable age, and then getting into the bikes because the bikes were so much more of an intense experience, and that was part of what kept me going with that too. But he just had a very different perspective of it, and that gave it a lot of other things a lot of validity, especially if you kind of got bored with the super out of touch, impossible to drive on a street, impossible to own in real life kind of stuff.
Unobtainium?
Yeah, the McLarens and and anything else like that. I've been lucky enough to be in a couple crazy things. Travis Okulski let me have a Nissan GTR for for an hour in an afternoon, and that was fantastic. I went to some completely insane thing out at Monticello one Saturday morning where I got to drive one of the new 992 911s, and that was like, yes, this is the best car in the world. This is the greatest thing I've ever driven. And I get back to my piddly little $10,000 Mazda, and I'm like, okay, well, this is actually real life, so that's fine. But yeah, there needs to be more of a validity of the idea of driving. Again, the idea of driving, being interested in driving versus being interested in cars, not being interested in, and the sense of, what do you do with these things? Is it a pure materialistic focus? Is it something that's like, I need this as an ego item, as something which seems to be entirely too much the case, versus is this something that does something in a particular way and I can get out there and use it and it's gratifying and it's meaningful? And that can be anything from clunky old MGB that runs correctly up to some of the good stuff.
Caveat, runs correctly.
Healing in a lot of cases.
Well, and that actually, small rant, brings me to one of my biggest pet peeves. I think the first person I ever heard say the phrase "mod out of class" was Rob Ferretti when he was talking about a friend of his, or maybe an employee of his, who had dropped $68,000 into a BRZ or an FRS or something. He was like, "You should never do this because you'll never get your money back." And that's, I mean, and he's correct, and that's perfectly good advice if you see cars only as a financial investment, which
Right.
I think Rob sees cars primarily as a way to make money. Not saying he doesn't like cars, but saying that he makes money from cars. And that has taken hold on a lot of people. And I'm like, people who say don't mod out of class, that's kind of to me like the car enthusiast version of always buy a Camry. Because on paper, a Camry is more car than you will ever need in life. It will outhandle and out accelerate every car from that I listed after in my childhood, and it will be more reliable. But it doesn't hit you emotionally. Why a car hits you emotionally is more interesting than the car in a lot of times. And you can't really reduce something that is almost always an emotional purchase from consumers to, well, that's not a $50,000 driving experience for you, or, you should never mod out of class. My wife arguably modded her 435 out of class. She could have easily have bought a M4 for what she spent total into that car. But when she test drove M4s, she liked her car better. So it was worth it. And I think a lot of money is being made buying and selling cars right now, or at least that's what it seems like. And people are starting to reduce cars to financial objects, which, yeah, but I don't think that that's the right road to take.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, it is just a functional device, and
Right.
there was
Appliance.
a couple years ago. It's like, this is the second biggest investment that you'll ever make, and you want to have it be something sensible. And I think the word sensible has gotten hijacked so that we see nothing other than crossovers on the road now. Even if they may not, if you get into them, they're not the most sensible things in the world anyway. But it's that image of capability and utility and all of that that people get for. I mean, and this goes back to the idea of, car enthusiasm and driving and everything and what it means right now, the kind of weird turns that the hobby, the cult, the whatever you want to call it, has taken. I mean, go to a Cars and Coffee. They start off with a bunch of cool eccentric stuff, and then they inevitably turn into a fleet of the latest and hottest German things, and it gets a little bit tiresome. You need a certain amount of income in order to play in this field, and I get tired of that mentality. And maybe it's being in New York, maybe it's just the idea of everything here being so price tagged and so like run up on part status, part income ability, and the competitiveness that goes here. It's like there's very, very little, if anything, that is very just pleasantly there and enjoyable. Either you buy an SUV or a crossover because you need a car, and this is going to take you everywhere and supposedly hold everything and all that. If anything, let's arbitrarily $50,000 before you can sit there and say, oh, I can actually enjoy this thing. I can actually have this as a machine that is not some penalty box to drive with car seats in the back or something like that. That's just the way that the culture is developed, and it's infuriating. And at the same time, the hegemony of the numbers. Oh my God, need to make this much power, need to have tires this wide, need to have this much top speed, has so paved over everybody's idea of sensation and enjoyment and innate gratification for what you're doing here. Again, getting back to the actual act of driving and what it's supposed to feel like. Which, and at the same time, the rarity of being able to enjoy that. Certainly around here, you have to get like a good bit out of the city in order to actually find some roads that are worth being, being on.
I'm intrigued about the arc of that for you in terms of just as an experience. So there was a point in your life you decided, I need a motorcycle in my life. I didn't know if you had one when you were a kid, but being a car guy in New York City is challenging at best. Adding a layer of motorcycle on top of that, you're trying to kind of resolve all those things in several pieces at once. Like, were all your rides in New York City at 6 in the morning when no one's on the road? Like,
oh God, no. Well, I didn't spend too much time in the city itself. I didn't want to be in traffic too much. Traffic in Manhattan isn't that bad. It's just slow. If I'm on my bicycle, that's a different game. I mean, you get in there and you're like dicing through everything and you're ripping through everything, and that's fantastic. If you're in a car, it's sort of like, okay, fine. You try not to spend too much time on anything in Manhattan itself. Queens and Brooklyn is a little bit of a different game just because, it flows a bit differently, and that's where you hear about people having accidents and things like that. The big thing was the bike was to commute with. It was going to be my means of transportation, or trying to prioritize it as my means of transportation. So I would be up in the morning, get out, go up the northern end of the city, head across Westchester, and then, the 30 miles of Connecticut that I need to go in order to get to school. And I thought this was going to be this sort of like, okay, it's there, I can park it easily. This is something I've wanted to do for an extremely long time. There was that, and then there was also like, okay, I just need to get out and ride it and practice and figure out what I'm doing here. And that would be going up to the hills up north of the city around Bear Mountain, where a lot of guys with bikes and sports cars and things like that like to go up, because the roads up there are actually pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I've loved bikes for a long time. The culture around them is a little annoying until you find a little like niche of it that you can feel comfortable at. I wasn't a Harley dude. I wasn't really a open bike psychopath. I wanted something that was sort of like just a good all-around bike. And ironically, it was the practicality that got it. Mm-hmm. Park it, because parking here is the biggest problem. I would burn a gallon of gas between here and Bridgeport. It's like, this is really kind of good. On a good day, it's like, I'm out here, this is big and, invigorating and everything. Basically, I was never in the situation where it would make any sense to do that. I was like insistent on getting my license first, which took entirely too long. There's this parts of my life where I couldn't buy a bicycle, never mind a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I can do this. That happened the first time. I bought the Honda 300. Okay, the official starter bike. It was a little bit on the light and slow side, and that lasted 5 weeks until somebody lifted it. Waited a couple of years, got to the point where it's like, I'm going back and forth to Bridgeport. I hate the parking situation. I can figure something else out. Then got another one. Sam Smith was in town a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to sit down and have coffee with him. And we were talking about this. And the idea that the image of motorcycling, and we eventually expanded this out to a lot of stuff, but the image of motorcycling with this sort of like freewheeling, going through the trees, everything is all around you, and you feel
bucolic,
flying and all of that, is very transitory and often very illusory. What I ran into was I froze my ass off repeatedly because it was still pretty cold in the morning in May. I would bake in July and August, being parked in traffic on the Deegan coming back down. The folks in Westchester drivers, I will put up, and I know that George will dispute that because he's in Atlanta, but I will stand on the idea that Westchester drivers are in contention for the worst drivers in North America. They are just.
I will give you in contention for.
I'm going to hand you a little bit. I don't think
you been to Boston recently?
The worst. I mean, but they're up there. I think that a lot of Westchester people, they grew up in the city, they never learned to drive. They move up there, and it's like, oh, I actually need a car. Let me buy a Lexus RX to cruise around in. And they never check their mirrors, and they have no idea about lane discipline, and they're just completely oblivious to everything. And anything gets in front of them, and they're like, oh, on the brakes, and it's like.
And then they realize that property is cheaper in the South and move to Atlanta.
You're welcome.
Anyway, the thing was, I could never shake the idea that this was, some people think that dangerous stuff is exciting. I think dangerous stuff has to be done with a certain level of maximum bodily harm. I caught one too many people on Instagram that was like, they just went down the street to get something and now they're gone. We will always remember them. And with one kid at home and one on the way, and I was just like, no. It got
You still have your jacket and helmet?
I was an obsessive helmet wearer. I have 2 jackets, 3 if you count the denim jacket, which I wasn't supposed to wear but was nice on light days. Yeah, I took safety very, very seriously. And, it was always, get prepared for it. I actually, if you look at my Doc Martens that I have at home, I still have tiny little keychain rings on the boots that I would tuck my laces into so that they weren't flopping around all over the place. I never got like engineer boots or pull-on boots or anything. I had those partially because my feet are so huge, but I was conscientious enough to, it's like, I don't want to have the laces flailing around, so I found a way to retract them to keep them in place. And the gloves and the long pants and the everything. And, being in Connecticut where helmets aren't required, and I'm looking around at everybody saying, you guys are insane. The fun just really wasn't there. I like it. And even on the good days, it was like, okay, this is good. Going around corners kind of freaked me out. It's not the most natural feeling thing in the world.
And like a bicycle.
After spending a lifetime on bicycles, even then, I mean, bicycles feel intensely natural. It's just like you're there, you're carving through and everything. On a motorcycle, maybe it's because it's so much heavier or because of the way the suspension works or something. I don't know.
It's way more a gyroscopic effect than the bike.
There's a whole lot of stuff going on. And, it's like if you're on an on-ramp and you haven't, I hadn't done it for a while. And the first on-ramp that I'm on, it's like, okay, I'm at 40 miles an hour. How am I doing this? I should stop and figure, no, I can't. Oh, God, here we go. It was a constant sense of, okay, I didn't fuck it up that badly, and I'm home. Good. That got to be pretty tired. When the second bike got stolen, I was pissed, but I was going to get rid of it anyway, so it didn't bother me that much. The part that bothered me was coming afterwards where I needed to find something to replace it. And I couldn't get another car. One car is a headache enough here. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of space. I'm starting to get into bicycles a bit more. George, you picked up on my avatar thing. That's a cassette sprocket cluster. That's as close as I get right now. But it's not the same. I mean, there's something special about bikes, but at the same time that they can be awful machines.
It's funny because Davey tried to talk me into getting a motorcycle at 45, and Sam tried to talk me into getting a motorcycle at 47. And right before, and I told the story of why I don't have a motorcycle, which isn't necessarily fit for the podcast, but according to both Sam and Dan Smith, is the greatest story ever told. But right before that, before Sam tried to talk me into getting a motorcycle, my wife's nephew was going to pick up his stepson from like first grade, and he was coming home to the house to get the car. There was construction. Somebody came out in front of him, and his leg was on backwards, and he spent the better part of 18 months in a wheelchair while getting that fixed. And that'll make you rethink getting a motorcycle real quick.
Yeah.
Like watching somebody go through that physical therapy will make you rethink getting a motorcycle real quick. And I was like, why is everybody trying to get me to get a motorcycle when I'm old and my reflexes have slowed and my ability to heal is on the down slope? So it's one of those things I've always wanted but have never gotten. But folks keep trying to talk me into it.
It just seems like a natural thing for you. On a good day, there is a purity to it. There is a sort of like, I am going fast down a road. The definition of a sports car is a car that's like got nothing on it that doesn't make it faster. That's a motorcycle. It even doesn't have 2 wheels on it to slow you down more. One thing about that is if Sam's trying to convince you to do this, I think I can say this without breaking too much of a confidence. Sam admitted to me that he's been running more often this year than he's been on his motorcycles. And he hates running.
You a runner?
I was trying to be. The knee surgery is on Friday. I can't remember the last medical experience that I was actually looking forward to that much. I've been padding around now off and on for a while. And it's like the first really good day I've had in a long time. It's like I'm out there and I just sort of like, screw it, I'm going to go until I drop. And I didn't, but I had a really great time. And then the next day it started aching, and it's like, I better lay easy for a while, and it just didn't stop aching. And then finally they MRI'd it, and it's a blown radial tear on the inner meniscus. So all kinds of fun, especially when you're trying to hobble around after the 3-year-old.
Yeah, they generally win.
Well, this was like 2 years ago, and one of my bad ideas was buying a Dr. Z Supermoto. And Sam was 100% all over how I don't need the Supermoto, but I need a Dr. Z, and this is what I need to mod it, and it'll be just like the Supermoto. It'll actually be better than the Supermoto, and I have to do this, and I could do it all for like $7,000. Come on, come on, come on, come on. You know how Sam works.
I adore Sam. He's one of my favorite human beings in the world. He's a sweetheart. He is a man of many faces. I mean, you see him on the videos, he is one thing. You see him in real life, he is very different. But the thoughtfulness inherent in all of it is there. So
there's a depth and character to his writing would lead you to believe he's something much older.
When you talk to his dad, you see where he gets it from. Dan is also very sweet, very thoughtful dude. There is a world out there where Dan Smith was like Peter Egan. But
that makes sense.
Hey, George, I want to give you an opportunity. Do you want to hazard a guess yet? What do you think the first car is going to be?
The worst part about this is the type of useless knowledge that I should remember. Because we have 100% spoken about this. For the 4 of you who are watching this, Patrick and I keep finding crazy similarities between ourselves, up to and including the fact that he's like exactly a month older than me. My first guess, and I don't know how many guesses I'm going to get, but my first guess, 3. All right, then I'm going to go with a Pontiac Grand Am, because that would be very close
Screaming
to
Chicken?
my first car. No, not the Firebird,
the
a Grand
Firebird.
Am. A Grand Am, because my first car was a Oldsmobile Cutlass Calais, which was the Oldsmobile version of the Grand Am, and so that's why I'm throwing that out there.
The pain on Patrick's face right now is priceless. I just want to point that out.
Flaky plastic BMW.
Yes, that one. Look, nobody chooses their first car. Their first car is chosen for them by either their parents or their part-time job.
Oh no, I was okay. First off, I didn't get my first car until I was 21.
Oh man, yeah, that's different.
That's the first huge thing. I mean, I could have inherited our '86 Ford Taurus, but Dad wasn't hot on that idea. When I sent this to Connor yesterday, I gave him the story behind, or on Friday, I gave him the story behind it. It was that I had spent the summer working at BMW in Germany, and I had, this much money when I came back.
Don't tell him what it is yet, though. Don't give it away yet.
No, I'm not. But
because I want to see him squirm.
But
this is all revenge for me making Connor actually be the co-host of this thing that he was trying to talk me into. By the way, that's why this is a thing.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, but no, this was this was me going through the auto traders when I was, when I'd come back home, and it's like, what can I get in my budget?
Okay. All right.
Patrick, where'd you grow up?
The Midwest. Spent my first 2 years or so in New York State. That's why I sometimes talk with this sort of like weird lilt. I picked up when we lived in Westchester, ironically, and my parents are much better than Westchester drivers in general. But we lived in Iowa, we lived in Michigan for a long time, we lived in Illinois, we were up in Minnesota for a couple of years, we went back to Michigan, I went to school in Ohio. So I ended up here in New York City 20 years ago because I had some friends from college out here. I am technically still a migrant here, but I'd like to claim a little bit of residency.
Mhm.
When my parents went to high school together in this small town in Pennsylvania, but they were both, like, I would call them proto yuppies. They were both like interested in the outside world and finding out about good things. And Dad had a friend at Notre Dame who had a BMW motorcycle and a Porsche 356, and that was like, okay, there is this whole world out there besides what's at the Buick dealership. And Mom, I don't know where she got it from, but when my parents got together seriously, Dad had a Mercedes 250 SL and Mom had a Porsche 912. Mom's driving into the public swimming pool up in this little town in Pennsylvania, and there's this kind of gangly, dorky dude walking behind her, and she gets, "Oh, hi, George. Hey, Judy, nice car." And the Porsche and the Mercedes came with them when Dad was in the Navy to go to Hawaii. When they left Hawaii, there was a dock workers strike. They could only bring one car back. They brought the Porsche. Got into California, had to drive home to Pennsylvania, and Dad's like, "All right, we're going to do this. We're going to go camping the whole time because Dad's an Eagle Scout. He hasn't been camping in forever. He needs to do this again." Mom had never been camping a night in her life, of course. The first night that they're out, they're stopped in some, national park someplace. They're there, they're set up. Everything's fine. The next campsite over, here comes the Hells Angels, roaring. Cut down a tree, pour gas on it, have a bonfire. Mom is like holding on to Dad for dear life, saying, "I am never going to forgive you for this." I think they stayed in hotels from there on out. Got home. Dad got into Cornell for grad school, needed something else, and he's like, "Oh, I read about these funny little things from Germany called BMWs." He drove one, he loved it, he bought it. So we had the Porsche and the BMW up in Ithaca when I was born. A couple years later, my brothers were born, and without telling Mom, Dad traded the BMW in on an avocado green Oldsmobile station wagon.
One of the official cars of Gen X childhood.
Yeah. When you have, and say and then the Oldsmobile went to a Buick station wagon. The Porsche rusted out like every Porsche built in 1969 did, and we got a diesel Volkswagen Rabbit. The Rabbit got replaced by the Taurus. The Buick station wagon got sort of replaced by a Lincoln Continental in 1980, and 1988 Lincoln Continental.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a weird progression. But yeah, my parents were the kind of people. Their honeymoon was the Trans Am race at Watkins Glen in 1970. So
was the BMW your first car memory, or was it the Porsche?
The Porsche was. I don't really remember the BMW that much. I remember riding in the backseat of the Porsche in that small Pennsylvania town. Just little flashes of it. It ended up in my grandfather's garage. He was going to rebuild it. He had bought the floor pans from Stoddard. He was rebuilding the engine when he died, and at age 80 of just being old and fat, but. Yeah, that kind of went away. And since then, there has been this enormous gulf in my life of I need something, cool and decently fast and, with a little bit of character in it. So that's still there.
It's interesting how that first car kind of forms your life. Although Connor's first car memory was a Messerschmitt, and he's not driving around in a three-wheeler.
Is the first car memory something that that informs you, or something that you like react to?
It's just visceral.
It's like if I'm in a cabine roller and I'm like, I am scared out of my mind. We're being passed by, the minis look like semi trucks, and it's like I would want to be like gravitating towards an Oldsmobile 88 for the rest of my life, just for the security.
Right, and like my first car memory was a '72 Corvette.
You're in the back seat of your back cubby of your uncle's Corvette. Yeah.
My dad's Corvette. With my uncle, it was my dad's car. My dad graduated from the University of Alabama Law School. He was I think he was the first class of black graduates from Alabama Law School. There were 5, one of which he found out was his cousin, which is hilarious, who went on to be the president of the youngest and first black president of the Alabama State Senate, um, which is, a cool thing. His wife still serves, his widow, I guess, still serves in the Senate today. But anyway, my dad graduated law school. He was working at Alabama. He asked for a raise. They told him no. He went and got a job in lower management at what was then and is now again AT&T. And then he went out and did the thing that all car guys do, which is bought way too much car for somebody who was married and had a pregnant wife. And so he bought a 1972 Corvette in 73 for, I want to say it was $50 less than his annual salary. And he kept that car until my brother was born in 76. And he could not put a toddler and a baby on the luggage shelf of it. And also the sunroof leaked like crazy. But I feel like stupid GT V8 is kind of something that I've been chasing.
But you also
my whole life,
which is how you ended up with German stuff. So yes, you want build quality in addition to like mountains of torque.
I married a woman who was really into BMWs, and Cadillac stopped making coupes. If there was a CT4 or CT5 coupe, I would have got out. That would be what I would be in right now. I literally got my M5 because they sold CTS V Sport that I was going to buy. As I was pulling into the lot, they sold the car, and they didn't have anything else on my price range on the lot. Yeah.
Is that the one? Is that the official one that got away?
So, if I was gonna go in all of the cars that I had, my CTS Coupe is my favorite car, and it was the first car I had that felt special, and it really wasn't that special. I mean, it's basically a V6 GTO Camaro underneath with a slightly fancier interior, but it felt like you didn't see them. People would always stare. That's a car that I would revisit.
Okay.
If I could find a manual CT, just a CT V6 coupe, which they're like 10, I would buy that. I saw one 5-6 years ago for like $16,000, and I just didn't have $16,000 to spend on a third car, so it wasn't gonna happen. The manual ones come with a limited slip. You can throw.
Wait. You're going to buy a manual? I thought you were sworn off manuals.
I haven't sworn off manuals. I have a.
You just have one manual. It's Handsome Rob, and that's it.
That's kind of it. I like manuals. Like if I'm gonna go up on a mountain run, manual. If I'm gonna go for a track day, manual. If I'm going to go to work in Atlanta traffic, automatic all day long.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, fair. I mean, maybe it's because I buy things that don't have terribly heavy clutches. I can manage manuals in traffic without too much trouble. I mean, like I said, when I had that god awful CX-30 for a while, it's like I felt a part of my brain had died.
Do you think that's true of the entire segment, though? I feel like so much of the way automotive has gone in recent years is just to insulate you from any kind of feeling or connection to, like, whether it's the seats that are going to either heat or ventilate depending on the time of the year, the steering, which is on most cars is completely numb. There's no feeling or feedback whatsoever. And as we kind of get to this sort of mono experience for a lot of things, it's very interesting to see. Like the video that I was most excited about during the week was the Chris Harris and I think there's a Jeff Tuttle with the 911 that weighs 1,800 pounds and revs to 11,000. And it was something that was so visceral. Now, granted, it's on obtanium again, like most things, but to be reintroduced into something like that, it just kind of brings back that rawness that we experienced when we were small. Like, yes, the Messerschmitt would scare the living crap out of me, but I remember the vibrations, I remember the sound, I remember all of it, and that's hard to find.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the motorcycle gets you some of the way there. Like that's probably motorcycling is probably the only thing that's going to remain somewhat intact on the other side of this whole automation and robotics and electrification.
I mean, on some level, you just described why Handsome Rob remains stuck on my
Fixture.
wallet. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. Like, to personal stories. I don't know if you know how loud a train is, but I mean, obviously, I
I try
go.
not to.
Trains are very, very loud,
They are.
extraordinarily loud. If you're paying attention, you can hear a train from about 5 miles away. The first time I took my wife's car out to take a picture of a train, I did not hear the train. I did not hear the whistle of the train. I saw the train before I heard the train.
Hmm.
Which that's just how it was the C43, and that's just how much sound insulation. I also had a situation once where I was out in the morning and there was an ambulance behind me, and I saw the ambulance before I heard the ambulance, and the ambulance was like a car length behind me.
Hmm.
And apparently that's a big problem that ambulance drivers are having, is that cars today are so insulated from the outside world that people don't hear them, and so they get stuck in traffic.
Well,
Like,
that's focus group logic for you. What do you want in a car? Oh, I want lots of power. Oh, I want it to be quiet. Oh, I want every feature that you can possibly throw in this for a decent budget. Until you actually like drive it and you realize it's a bunch of things that everybody said yes to, but you don't get the sense of this is too much. This is
it's
you know
it's
the
why a Mini is now the size of an E46.
I guess that's one of the nice things about the reason that everybody keeps talking about Mazdas, and it drives, I'm sure it drives normal people nuts. Why do you keep talking about this one damn Japanese car brand? It's because it's not, it rejects a fair bit of that. It still, gets the sense of, you kind of want to be involved in the environment and you want to have a car that feels like you're doing something instead of like, playing a very slow video game in the middle of traffic. I hope that we always have the Miata around in some sense, or to the extent that that ever means anything anymore. But that remains some sort of this is the way it should be, some ideal for
There
those.
is nobody on this call that fits in a Miata. Hush.
I
I am too tall for a Miata, and I'm the shortest person on this call. So,
I would like to try it again. I mean, the NA that I drove before I bought the 3, it was just my legs were a little too tight. Everything was okay. I was in it, and it was just like, do I want to be in here for an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours a day, feeling this buckled in?
But there's also that point in your life now, which we're all entering, which is egress is not elegant.
I can still manage. I mean, it irritates me
Before surgery, on a point.
Yeah, I know. It irritates me to no end that the only justification that anybody can think of to buy a crossover is like, oh, you get to climb up into it. I don't like.
okay,
climbing up into it.
so let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, which is that we now have a crossover in the family as of last Saturday.
Well, you had the X5 before, so
We had the X5 before, and much for the same reason. We have 3 dogs, but one of the things that my wife pointed out is that she has never seen me get into a car as easily as I've gotten into this one. And the thing that actually I like and annoys me the most about it is, if you look at it, it's a wagon. It's
Yeah.
parked behind the Mini, and the bumper height difference between it and the Mini is maybe 3/4 of an inch. What I want is to drop that car by an inch. It's a GLB 35. The GLA 45 technically is classified as a car, not a crossover, because it's too low. And it's the same thing. It's basically, hi, we've made a station wagon and we put an inch worth of spacers in the shocks, and now we're gonna call it an SUV.
So we made a station wagon, then we sent it to the marketing department so that they can actually sell the thing to the people out there.
Right. And people are like, why don't you get a Outback? Because what I really want is a Legacy GT wagon.
Yeah. The thing about that, I mean, you were like, I've got to get a crossover. You're going to hate me now. It's like, George, one of the things about you is that when we're talking about stuff, I have to remember to like not say mean things about BMW drivers. I have an endless like loathing of at least BMW drivers around here. But I got to remember, it's like, I am not counting you as one of them. You're one of the good guys who happens to own one. You're not one of those BMW drivers.
One of those. Okay. That's good news.
I will say this. I mean, well, first.
Connor also BMW driver. But...
Oh, that's true. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that, Connor. Yeah, you're good. But yeah, that's. I mean, that talking about the city and talking about here, the culture of what you see here is, you get an endless number of F10s, the previous 5 series, and all the X cars. And last summer, most of them had the goddamn anti-lag tune on them. And we were up on 53rd. We're up on 53rd Street, which is an exit off of the FDR, and it sounded like a goddamn shooting range.
The 850 comes with that as a stock tune. It is fun for about 3 minutes, and then you're like, I'm an idiot. Let me turn this off.
Because they're driving BMWs, at least BMW drivers, they may be annoying. The kids may be annoying douchebags, but at least they have somewhat better taste. The window stickers on BMW drivers are a step above the window stickers for the Infiniti drivers, who are another whole class above the Honda drivers. The BMW kids have at least a little bit of a sense of humor. It's like the one that I saw. It's like the first time I saw a "Thank God for Yoga Pants" sticker. It's like, okay, you're kind of a jerk, but bro. But yeah, that's what you run into. And again, I mean, the thing about cars in New York City is, their personality extensions, their ego, they are showing off in a lot of cases. You don't get a ton of the good eccentric stuff. You do get that a little bit every once in a while. There is a garage in the neighborhood where somebody has a 330 GT2 Plus 2, one of the single headlight ones, that I actually see out and running around every once in a while, and it makes my week. And Anna's always like, what are you so excited about? It's hard to have a car here, and I think the biggest thing is the parking. It's the density of people and the fact that you have, you only have so much space, and trying to keep anything, if you're not willing to spend, if I put it in the basement of the building, it's $500 a month. That's about what level you're on when you're doing that.
I will give you this, though. At least you live a place that is structured that you can live there and not have to drive. One of the things that has become painfully obvious here is we have 3 dogs, as I mentioned. I walk one of them twice a day, and we walk all of them once a day. So basically 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening, when people are leaving for work and coming home, we have no sidewalks. And so we're walking 3 dogs with no sidewalks. In case anybody is wondering, the worst drivers in the world are young men who all think that they are wearing white socks and loafers and aiming for the apex of the curves. We live on a fairly curvy street, and they're all aiming for the apex being marked by the giant black dude in the high-vis jacket with the dog with the red blinking collar, and middle-aged women who are all looking at their phones. You would think it would be young women. Young women always see the dog and slow down and wave and like make googly eyes. Middle-aged women don't give a single damn and will quickly run you over.
That's consistent around here too.
So yeah, I mean, so living in a place that like there are no sidewalks. I live 3 miles from 3 grocery stores. I can't safely walk to any of them. I have to get in my car. It's like, I would like to maybe live someplace where I didn't have to do all that. I was in much better shape when I could ride my bike to Turner's Grocery, pick up stuff, and then ride it back to my grandma's house.
There's a nice medium out there someplace. When I lived in Ann Arbor, that was really nice. You could walk downtown. You could get out without too much. I would drive to get groceries because the grocery store was on the other side of the city. But, you could go and go down the street and get a 6-pack of beer and be back home. Walk a bit. And that's the funny thing is, people who don't know car people assume that we like driving everywhere and assume that we are like intent on going as fast as possible everywhere. And I would say a simple majority of car people are like, yeah, I wish I could walk around a bit more. I wish that we had better public transportation. I wish that there was this like more evolved system. Maybe because we read all the stuff about Europe or something, but it's like we want to have this be something that is, good for what the cars do. What do you buy a car for? It is fast, it goes long distances, and in various weather. It's not the sort of thing where it's like, okay, I want to go 3 miles down the road in order to get something from Costco.
I feel like that's most car people, but the ones who are like, no, Marats are the loud ones.
Challenger drivers.
Challenger drivers. Johnny Lieberman told me a story about a Challenger driver trying to flex on him when he was driving a McLaren once. And I'm like, that is the most Challenger driver. When I had the M5, it was the big blue M5. Everybody had said M5 on the back. So here comes a Challenger driver. Let's have a rev off. Like, you got me by 2 liters. Like, what you want? So, yeah, car culture.
So George, here we go. So you got 2 more guesses.
Yeah,
2 more guesses. What's Patrick's car after working at BMW and growing up with his first car that he remembered was a 911. There was a BMW that he vaguely remembered, and then he went straight into Holiday Road. What did he get as a 21-year-old? He got a clapped out Sentra SER.
Those there. Actually, yeah. Those would have been, and so that was a little bit outside my budget. Those were nice.
They were nice.
Those were nice. I mean, yeah, everybody's like, oh my God, awful crash scores. We didn't care about that.
No.
You
can't find them anymore.
Oh God, they're all gone. Yeah. The MX 2000, same thing. Baby 928. There was a leftover CRX SI at a dealership in Dayton that was sitting there for entirely too long that I kept going to visit. And it was like, $10,000. I can't do this. Of course, $10,000 is like, yeesh. But it would take a couple of years before I bought Japanese, and that was that horrible Prelude that with the rusted out gas tank and the bad valve guides and the timing belt that I never replaced and the air conditioner that did, that. And right. I have a thing about Preludes right now after that anyway, but that's a different story.
All right, one more.
All right, so it was a while before you went Japanese. BMW still seems like it would have been out of your price range, although I don't know, E30s were dirt cheap for a while. You can get one for like $500 for the longest time.
E30 would have. E30 still had the yuppie stink.
E36 was there.
E36. We were in the middle of the 36s. This was 1994.
Right. 1994, yeah.
So the 46 would be a while, and which
would be 5 years from there, yeah.
I mean, the funny thing, everybody loves the 46s. Connor, again, this is like you're accepted from this because of everything you've done to that one, which I think you're insane, but amazing. Do you remember when the E46 came out and all the articles were like, oh, it's kind of soft and BMW doing here, they've lost it a little bit. Now everybody's like, oh, it's the greatest car that's ever been made. But the response at the time was that it was a bit more mainstreamed.
It was a bit more mainstream
compared to the E36, which
I think it won. Its interior didn't self-destruct.
That's
which
true.
I think if the E30, I think its interior didn't self-destruct, and the M3 finally got the real motor.
Yes.
I think those are the two things that. But now people are like, well, E46 cost $1 bajillion, and the E36 is basically a slightly more caveman E46. So that's what I'm gonna spend a $500 million on. And your first car was not a Camaro. It was a. It was a Rabbit.
No, close. Ironically close. And yes, prepare to be traumatized. There we go.
Sorry about the delay.
No, that's fine. And back in the before time,
1994 Audi Coupe GT.
I would have fought you for that car back in the before time. I would have,
Thunderdome.
that before the unpleasantness, that would have been a dream car.
It did have some electrical issues here and there. So, your experience was an elaboration instead of something completely unusual to me. But yeah, it's funny. That was basically $1,500. The one next to it in the Auto Trader was a Triumph Spitfire for $1,500. I didn't really even flip a coin to sort of like say which one of these was I going to go get. I was really interested in both of them. I just like ended up getting the Audi faster. And it's like, okay, fine. I do have to live with winter in Michigan and a few things like that, so maybe it wasn't a terrible idea. But yeah, I had that for 4 years. Probably put 100,000 plus on it. Hard to tell because the odometer was broken off and on. 115 horsepower, something ridiculous. 185 section tires, beam rear axle. The brakes would fade if you were hammering on it for more than 20 minutes. But yeah, just like.
And now folks are buying them up to make Quattro clones.
Yeah.
Patrick, I've got one last question, and we're going to wrap this up. In preparation for this, I read quite a number of your blog posts on statesofmotion.com. The one I liked, one of my favorites, was the agreement. And what was interesting about that is I let ChatGPT loose on it, and I asked it for an analysis of it. And then said, overall, this article presents a unique blend of elements of the supernatural, artistry, and motorsports, creating a thought-provoking and engaging narrative that keeps readers captivated until the very end. Which leads to my next question. Is there a book?
No.
Do you plan on writing a book at some point?
I have been trying to think about that. I have, my entire conscious life, it's been, I should write a book one of these days. I have no idea what to write about. It's like, it's like it's like saying I'm going to, it was a cute short story. I've got one other guy at school Greek dude who knows a bit about Formula One, and I said something about, what's his name? Red Bull's psycho guru.
So you're not getting help from me because, Formula One.
Yeah, you. Nui. When I wrote, I said something about, it's like, okay, yeah, the season, and it's another case of Adrian Newey's black magic, and it was like, that's actually kind of a fun idea. When I was writing it, I actually had, I don't know if I was writing Adrian first and then subbing in Alistair afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
That was just something like, okay, what if you did a Faustian deal with somebody who was that competitive and that focused on winning? And I've sort of had this idea about, can you do a racing series set in a space opera world where you've got like the struggling club racer who does this series with like, Star Wars-ish flying machines with all the aliens and the grudges and the money issues and everything else. Basically take everything I know about small-scale club racing and put it into A-Wing fighters. But
you can.
George already has the soundtrack in mind, I think, for this.
Yeah.
No, well, there's a anime called Redline, which is basically a science fiction racing. You could come into it with a different perspective than handsome dude in fast car gets girl and wins, which is basically what Redline is.
Patrick, I know you've got burning things to do for your week ahead, so I don't want to be too greedy with what we've been discussing so far. I look forward to future writings on as you pursue some of these other longer form ideas. It's going to be fun, and hopefully in years we can come back and look at this episode and like, oh yeah, remember when we talked about that thing, and now it's this. And
I'm going to say right now, Patrick, you're going to have to come back because you have far too many interesting ramblings to be contained within 60 minutes.
For them. That's the whole thing.
We're happy to provide it. All right,
All
gentlemen.
right. So yeah, this is. I mean, we've been sufficiently all over the place for an hour 15.
Would you expect anything less?
Of course.
It's today's
All right.
bad idea, not today's tight hour discussion on one topic.
Highly choreographed. Yeah. See you on the
Hey.
interwebs.
Go from there. All right.
It's good talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.